Good morning. That doesn't sound like a good morning. Bad shrimps on yesterday's trip. I made two very important notes for myself. Try not to fall off the stage, because it's quite tricky. And be cautious about timing, because I'm not really good in that. So my timer is on. Any Avenger fans here? Good. Sadly, this talk won't be about Avengers, even though I would love to deliver it. But I tried to sneak them in since I picked the name of my talk as Build Your Cloud Operating Model on Azure from Zero to Hero. And who doesn't want to be a hero, right? Well, I hate to disappoint you, but from my experience, there isn't such thing as easy and quick way how to build such a model. And mainly, it's because there are three main pillars that you always need to think about. It's people, it's tools, and processes. And regardless how awesome tooling you use and how lean processes you adopted in your organization, it's always people who are the most difficult part. I mean, if you think about them, their APIs is very poorly documented, if at all. Some of their instances are very incompatible with anything around them. And any attempts to upgrade them to a better version with some kind of new functionality can end up in a disaster with a very limited possibility to roll back. But tech jokes aside, instead of giving you a long list of recommendations about how you can or should build your cloud operating model, I decided to tell you a story. A true story about a customer, one of my big customers I've had a pleasure to work with for a long time. And it is about one particular engagement where I helped them to build their cloud core platform team. I will talk about that in a while, what it is, and build their platform. So it's based on a true story. And of course, what worked for them should not or might not work for you. But I hope it will at least inspire you. So shortly about myself, my name is David Pazdera. I work as a cloud solution architect in Microsoft Norway. You might see a few of my colleagues in our booth down in the expo. And I'm part of a team called the Customer Success Unit. It's a large pool of cloud professionals, and our mission is to help our customers to help them with their adoption journey to Azure. Most of my career was focusing on infrastructure and automation, the dark side of the force. And this is my very first NDC talk. So I hope I won't crash and burn. But I'm very excited to be here, and I hope we will have some fun together. Feel free to follow me on social media. I recently reached a huge milestone. I have 100 followers on Twitter. So I'm certainly hoping that this conference will give me a bit of more followers, so it will definitely make my day if you follow what I'm thinking about. And why do I have Stark Industries logo on this slide? Well, first of all, it will be about Avengers, partly. Not really, but I will use them as a main theme. But the thing is that I sort of forgot to ask my customer if I can use their name in the talk. So instead of messing up and maybe ruining a good relationship, I decided to sort of hide him away. So we will talk about Tony Stark's company instead. But the story is true, I promise. It would be nice to begin with some kind of definition. So what is cloud operating model? And you might immediately ask, is this just about governance and stuff like cost management and tagging and reporting? And more importantly, is it just for large organizations that have a large data center footprint? And Is it just for migration scenarios where you want to sort of lift and shift your entire IT assets to the cloud? We will try to answer questions, all these questions throughout the session and recap in the end. But surprisingly, there isn't one good definition of cloud operating model that the industry would agree on. If we check Wikipedia, there isn't a single article that would directly reference it and explain it. So maybe Gartner has something, they always do. But maybe the term itself or the cloud operating model, it sounds a bit too abstract. How about cloud readiness or even hybrid cloud foundation? Are these more familiar to you? Not so much. So will Microsoft help us with defining what is cloud operating model? To be honest, we haven't been very clear on the topic in the past. Has anyone tried to read and use any of these white papers? Some of you? Good. And we really published a number of these white papers and guides and other stuff, but it wasn't really consistent. I'm not saying that they are bad, but they are quite verbose. It's many pages you need to read. They always have this kind of strategic viewpoint, and there is hardly any code in them. So I was hoping for having something more down to earth, more practical. But do not despair, there is hope. Ta-da! Microsoft Cloud Adoption Framework for Azure. We are very good in picking short names. So this should be one place, one framework to rule them all that supersedes all previously published documents, or at least in some extent it references to them. And it's a place that should give a company of any size with any scenario and any technology stack a journey, how they can start and how they can sort of get themselves into the cloud. So that sounds promising, doesn't it? Well, apart from the fact that it's quite verbose and there is no code in it, and it has a very strategic viewpoint, it is still a right step forward. It has two main journeys, innovation and migration, because honestly, not every company has plus 30 years of history of their data center legacy that they want to migrate to the cloud. So at least we have two distinct journeys. It also comes with a few similarities, like 3 stages. It's plan, it's ready, and it's operate. It also comes with 3 strategies that every company should think about. It's business, it's people, and it's technology. But it still does sound a bit too heavy to me. So luckily, I'm not going to go through this model because it would take quite a while. I still encourage you to read it. Just go to aks.ms/caf, and you can maybe get inspired about what high-level stuff you need to have in place before you start really hacking the cloud. But I would like to switch gears and talk about our story and Stark Industries. So as every story, we have a few chapters to go through. One I would call forming the core platform team. This team can have many names. I saw Central Cloud Team, Cloud Center of Excellence, and many more. It doesn't matter what the name is. It's a typically small, a lean team, but I saw also big ones. And it normally doesn't comprise many developers, but rather cloud engineers or people who have background in IT, operations. They are quite good in security, compliance, and they can help and they can sort of focus on building the foundation. So they are not really shipping new libraries. They are working on the cloud platform itself. And the same happened in our company. They established a small team, 6 persons. I had a pleasure to become one of them. And we started the journey. So how does this team operate? Or let's say how it should not operate. You might have experienced that. Your traditional corporate IT that is used to have a full control over all data center resources. With this new cloud thingy, what they are trying to do is to sort of keep you away. And they try to do things like, we will build a process and you need to use a ticketing tool and we will provision some cloud resources for you, right? That's a good model. Or we will build some kind of abstraction, a portal or an API, maybe, that we will maintain, and you will actually talk to that, and we will hide all the cloud-native APIs from you. This model is clearly not sustainable. First of all, this team will always be limited when it comes to resources, and they can't, regardless of what cloud provider you use, they can't keep up with the pace of development, how many features, how many new services are popping up in that cloud. So we consider that as a clear anti-pattern. And I like to see them as the good old Gandalf the Grey and "you shall not pass" quote. So how it could or should look like. This team should work on something called cloud-native governance. And instead of standing in a way, they should use cloud-native capabilities to actually build those controls and that protection that will enable the compliance for the platform, but will not prevent application teams to use that cloud in a native way. So they are not standing in the way, they are enabling them, they are enabling agility, but at the same time, they are making sure that certain standards are met. And as you can see, Azure provides a large portfolio of tools that in a combination can help you to achieve that. So our team with 6 guys actually took this as a very core principle because we would not be able to scale if this was the case. Now we have a team. So how does this team operate? Is it a project? Should we set up a project timeline with 4 milestones and we're done in 6 months? Nope. It begins with something that some people call the North Star architecture, meaning that you need to make certain high-level design choices that will help you to sort of focus on a long-term goal. I cannot really show you the Stark Industries real architecture because it's customer specific, but at least you can see some key design areas that you should consider, starting from your identity, which is always a good beginning. What you should use to provide protection of maybe high privilege accounts. How are you going to work? Will it be in a semi-manual, semi-automatic, or fully automated way? How will you utilize things like management groups? And many more. This team is also very often responsible for building some shared services because it doesn't make sense for every small application team to do their own version, especially when we are talking about enterprises that are extending their IT to the cloud. And things like corporate network and on-premises Active Directory, they can't really sort of give away the responsibility to 15 different teams. So how this team really work? I wrote a few key steps that we took in our journey. First of all, we identified or tried to identify what type of teams we are dealing with, or we treat them as our customers, and how they differ in operating the cloud. I know that DevOps is a cool thing, and everybody wants to do that, or be there, or whatnot, but not every team is ready for that. So we quite early identified 2 types of teams. One, really building new shiny things, or new things, and a team that is fully staffed to take full responsibility, not only for the application, but also underlying infrastructure, regardless if you use IaaS or PaaS. But then there are also teams who are used to having all those managed infrastructure services, either from a central IT or some outsourcing partner or vendor. And they really don't want to touch that infrastructure. They are very skilled in that particular application and related business process. So you can't really throw this responsibility at them and say, here we go, you have the APIs, and yeah, you should use Git, and yeah. So that wouldn't work. We need to be able to support both types of customers. Build your operational platform iteratively. So, like I mentioned, this is not a project. What this team is doing is they are building a product. We treat it as a product. Of course, we are not shipping new versions of an application or some libraries. We are delivering platform features. But it's a regular Scrum team. We have a product owner. We have our ceremonies. We use product backlog. And we sort of work as if it was a regular agile project. And it doesn't have an end. We don't plan to have an end because we can't really plan what the business will need in that early stage. What we did, we built or defined an MVP, how this platform should look like, what it should deliver in the beginning. And then throughout the iterations, we will improve and deliver more. Design a robust platform as code for various projects. So first is robust platform. So like I said, this platform needs to support various projects. We have a customer who have an existing application in their data center, and they want to do a lift and shift migration to Azure. Definitely, there is a lot of dependencies and integrations with the corporate network, maybe some enterprise service bus, BizTalk. There is definitely integration with Active Directory. So they will have different requirements. What do they need in order to succeed in their project, comparing to a team that is maybe playing with the new machine learning service in Azure, or they are building a new data lake. And the platform needs to really be ready to respond to those different requirements. In order for us to really address that in this limited capacity, what we did is we decided to treat the whole platform as a code, because then we can scale and we can rely on our CI/CD pipeline to do any important changes automatically. I will have a short demo on how it works, but basically, if you think about and you know that how management group and subscriptions, how they are structured in this hierarchy, every element is a folder and a file, a JSON file represented in this file system. So if we want to add, for instance, a new subscription to an existing management group, which is a folder, we will simply create a new folder, and in that folder we will add subscription.json file, and we will ask the pipeline to actually provision a new subscription for us. In this way, we can treat this repository as a single source of truth. Of course, we have an option for a break glass emergency account in case something goes south, so people can do manual quick changes. But in order to honor this single source of truth sort of principle, what we did is that the pipeline is designed to actually check what's in Azure today, compare it with that repo, see the diff, and actually commit those manual changes back to the repo. Define onboarding projects or some kind of self-service. It's something called democratization of subscriptions. So what you don't want is to get tickets, please create a subscription for me. You want to allow teams to get this self-service. And yes, in the beginning, what we established is a quick and dirty process with an email which has specific attributes that we ask. Specifically, it's like what is the owner of that subscription? their identity and something related chargeback, because a lot of enterprises actually do care about costs, and not only enterprises. So this is something that is not perfect, but in MVPs you don't really want to have a perfect in the beginning. So we know that we will improve that, but what we see as for a more advanced team as a easy way how they can actually get this self-service is that we will give them access to our repo, and they will just create a branch, add all those files they need. They need a new subscription, they know what to do, and they will send a pull request. We will review it, and then we will allow the pipeline to provision that subscription for them. So it will be quite easy. So just a quick demo. How does it look like? At this point, I need to give credit to my friends in the Azure Cat team. Maybe some of you have worked with them. Of course, because that's how it always works. So this repo is a fork from my colleague Uday. And if you look at the root folder, or maybe it would be good to zoom it a bit. If you look at the root folder, then we have M2, which is a management group, and what you will see, there is a long list of files which represent either role assignments or role definitions or policy assignments or definitions. And in this file, it's a simple JSON, but you might be wondering, how do I get all these details when I'm trying to create a new element like a management group or subscription? Obviously, you can't have the GUID in advance. So how it works, you create a simple file with just like a name. And then what we allow the pipeline to do is to, when the new subscription is provisioned, and we get all the data, all the metadata, we allow the pipeline to actually write back to that repo and enrich that file with those details. And we can go deeper in this structure, but you probably got the idea. Instead of managing policies inside the Azure portal, everything is treated as a code, so we can always refer to it, we can version it, and we can do different assignments. So there are some key learnings from this process that I can talk about. First of all, you need to define requirements for compliance. In this case, Stark Industries didn't have to follow any specific industry regulation, but many customers do, like ISO 27001. And you might have noticed, we recently published a blueprint. We will talk about Azure blueprints in a while. We published a blueprint that will help you to basically implement a hub with shared services and some central components that is compliant with this standard. In addition, we will look at that in the Azure Security Center. You can actually validate your environment against certain standards like PCI DSS and ISO and see where your compliance fails. What we had instead is typically every company has IT security policy. It's a long document with all the controls and operational requirements that needs to be compliant. And then we just try to see how this can be reflected in Azure. So whatever we deployed, whatever controls, whatever policies we chose, it was aligned with that corporate standard. Design hierarchy and subscription model. There are a lot of guides on how to do that. What worked for us was a simple fact that we are not giving away resource groups, because that's convenient. You can assign rights on that level, and then you can sort of have many teams sharing one subscription. We thought that there are some limiting factors for this model. First of all, some resources create their own resource groups, and then you have some trouble with rights. But and there are, of course, some current limitations on how many subscriptions you can provision programmatically. I hope this limitation will go away very soon. But essentially, we define the structure based on 3 different categories of subscriptions that we have in the environment. We call it corporate, standalone, and management. Management is for us, for our purpose. And then inside corporate, we have those subscriptions that require all that backbone back to the CorpNet and all that dependency on AD. And standalones are more like you're free to play, but don't expect any shared services to be attached to it, because there is a high risk of getting maybe some data exposed or something like that. And we group those types of subscriptions in 2 distinct management groups, so we can apply different policies, maybe more restrictive on the corporate part and maybe less in the standalone part. So that's what we did. The top-level management group we reserve for some configuration that is very global. We don't have much things in there. And we always try to assign those policies higher up in the stack, so we don't need to repeat that in many instances. So some companies, they assign policies on each and every subscription, and it's the same policy. Well, unless you really need to treat each subscription differently, it's a much better idea to sort of assign that policy higher up. Apply top-level controls, policies, and RBAC. So I talked about policies a bit. What worked for us is as we started with audit mode, which allowed us to see what would happen, what would be the end-user impact, without actually impacting them. This company has a strict process. They call it risk assessment review, where they actually review every single Azure resource type or service and say, can we use it or can't we use it? And if we can use it, do we require any configuration? Do we need to enforce things like encryption? And of course, this needs to be part of that policy package that the platform team needs to deliver. So we are using something called whitelisting for the resource types that are allowed or not allowed. Testing deny policies in non-production. So the way we actually assign and test new policies is that we have like a shadow structure in the whole organization tree, and we are in our CI/CD pipeline. We treat it as a non-production environment. We assign policy there, and we can do testing. Does it really work? Does it have the right effect that we expect it to do? And we're not there yet, but we are trying to use Pazdera as a testing framework to actually apply that change and then run a few tests that should guarantee that the policy is actually doing what's expected from it. Deploy if not exist. Some of you might know how this policy can work. It's actually a nice way. If you forgot, we won't deny you. We will actually do something for you. And we've been thinking, should we use this as a nice way of treating our customers? But then there is a dilemma. If we deploy that for them, it's not part of their source control if they happen to use it. So we're not really helping them. So what we do instead is that we are helping them to actually change their source code and asking them to do that. So at this stage, we are using deny policy, and we have a dialogue with them, helping them to understand, you forgot to turn on subscription encryption. And they will learn, and they will actually improve the source code and redeploy, instead of us fixing their mistakes. For RBAC, least privilege principle is quite well known. We are using custom roles for a few good reasons. And we also embrace this just-in-time access principle, meaning that we don't have long-standing permissions in the platform. we have just reader for everybody. And we made certain people and teams eligible for sort of increasing their privileges based on their demand. And it's something called privilege identity management in Azure. It started in Azure AD, and now it's available also for Azure resources. The inheritance works beautifully, so if we want to sort of give this eligibility on a management level, we can, and they can manage more subscriptions under that tree if they want to. And manage identities, they were mentioned a couple of times in some talks yesterday. It's a really nice way how to sort of give an identity to your application, to your service, and let Azure manage it for you, and just use it in your role assignments. Stamp out standard cloud environment with blueprints. Has anyone heard the blueprints? About blueprints? Yes. Well, this is actually on our roadmap. We are not using it, and I'll give you the reason why. This is still a preview feature, and the team has made a conscious decision that we won't try any preview features and deploy them in production. But we are playing with them in non-production. So for those of you who are not familiar with the concept, it's a quick look. So an idea is that a cloud engineer will create a blueprint, which is like a logical construct that has few artifacts. It starts with a subscription, which will be provisioned. Currently, you need to have a subscription provisioned in order to apply blueprint, but the product team has a roadmap where they are thinking that they will allow to create or provision that subscriptions as part of the blueprint, which would be cool. And then what you can use as an artifact inside that blueprint is you have your policy assignments, you have your role assignments, and you can have ARM templates too. So you can actually define a certain set of common resources that you want to have in each and every subscription. A good example for this corporate type of environment is a spoke virtual network that you want to peer automatically with the hub and get this end-to-end connectivity with your corporate network. And you don't want to do that manually. So blueprints can actually help you to establish this connection automatically as well. On the roadmap, there is also a possibility to have custom code, custom scripts. I heard some rumors how they are planning to do that using container instances, but I'm not sure if I'm allowed to talk about it. Sometimes it's hard to distinguish. We are getting information from different forums. Something is NDA just for certain customers. Something is public. Something is not even for anybody outside Microsoft. So I need to be careful. But the idea is that you define this blueprint, and yes, you can define it in form of a code. It started with a UI experience in the portal, but you actually can now manage the blueprints, definitions, again, JSON files, what else? You can manage them in form of a code instead of clicking and double-clicking. So when you have this construct, you have a draft version, you need to publish it in order to be able to assign it. And you then assign it for your new subscriptions, or existing ones, of course. The nice thing is that, as you know, there is an option to use parameters for all three types of artifacts, and you don't need to have those details about those things in advance. You can actually assign those parameters while you're assigning the blueprint. The nice thing is also that you can version it. You can make new version, publish it, see the difference, and reapply it. So I'll try to do a quick demo. It's always funny. So it's in the Azure portal, of course. And you can begin with a blank template. That's fine. But as you can see, the product team try to publish some standard templates like common policies or resource group with RBAC. But you also see those ISO 27001 I mentioned before. So these could be quite useful, but they also tend to be quite complex. There is a number of controls you need to have in place. So just to give you a quick look how it might look like. Here you see the entire structure of the blueprint with all the artifacts and the hierarchy. So you can create resource groups, and under those resource groups, you can create those resources that you like. And of course, on the subscription level, assign policies. You can, in fact, assign policy on a resource group level as well, but it becomes quite difficult to manage. Unless you have a very good reason for that, it would be better to do it differently. And then you can simply assign or publish. This one that I have is actually in draft mode. So I would need to publish it, give it a version, and once it has a version, I can assign it, and it will kick a provisioning process. So everything that needs to happen inside that blueprint, all the artifacts needs to be deployed, it will be done. So that's what the team is now currently working on. Subscription as a unit of scale. So previously, we had recommendations start with a small amount of subscriptions, as small as possible, and then scale out as you need. Mainly because there are some quota limitations. You probably know that, but we saw this also as a disadvantage. So instead, by default, we are handing over subscriptions and telling people use them wisely. You will have all the possibilities with that subscription. You are also responsible for the cost for the entire subscription. But we also need to cater for scenarios where there is a small team who has 5 really small applications and they don't want to get 5 subscriptions. So we are actually offering both resource groups and subscriptions. So how do you actually monitor and manage all that? As a platform team, we are responsible for compliance, or everybody's responsible for compliance, but we have the top level view. We see all subscriptions. So what we do a periodical audit of the overall compliance. We do it in 2 places. We have a Azure Policy Compliance Center, and we also have this Azure Security Center, which is fairly new. So I'll just again quickly show you that. So in policies, you have a compliance center. And depending on what scope you select, now I'm only using 1 single subscription. If I can, I would choose many more, but since I have only 1, it doesn't really make a difference. And you can see what's the status of your compliance, how many resources are compliant or non-compliant, and you can drill down and see what needs to be done. And of course, you would expect that if I have some resources deployed today, and now I apply certain policy, it won't have a sort of a backward effect. Suddenly, I can't really deny those resources to exist. So there will be a lot of incompliance when you start with a new policy. But you can work with those resource owners to sort of help them to become compliant. Or eventually, if it's a deny policy and they try to redeploy that resource, then they will actually hit that compliance limit. And the second thing I wanted to quickly show, and I mentioned as well, is in the Azure Security Center, where you have regulatory compliance. So this is quite nice. Any of you that needs to comply with PCI DSS and some of these quite strict standards? No? Norway is so cool that they don't really, maybe some European laws and GDPR, but that's it. So you can see that my security center is able to assess that entire environment and see what controls, I'm green, what controls I'm gray, so yeah, it can't really decide. Or in some cases where I'm red, where actually I have a big gap and I need to fix that, and it will actually help me to fix that. So that is really a good help for such platform team who is responsible for the overall compliance. Monitor the health. Well, monitoring is an interesting topic because you don't want to be the one central monitoring and monitor all the application health and all the nitty-gritty details with application insights for each and every team working on that platform. You just focus on the overall health, right? And you can't really sort of pick and choose what tool each and every tool should be using. Some love Dynatrace, some love New Relic for their APM. But you still need to care about the overall platform. So surprisingly, not many customers either know or use these 3 tools. But Azure Status Page is quite well known. And when things go red, yeah, you get a lot of tweets and attention. But that's only give you like a big picture view, a regional view. There is a service outage for this specific service in that region. It's not really personalized. What you should use instead is Azure Service Health, which is a place where it's giving you personal recommendation and a status about your resources in your environment. It also allows you to use those things and enrich your dashboards. If you're using dashboards inside Azure Portal and combine certain controls and graphs, then stuff that it gets from Service Health is definitely can be part of it. And if you drill down, then you get a resource health, which is health of individual resource and its history. So you can actually check back how your Cosmos DB was doing last couple of days. I think I'll skip this one. Resource graph. It's yet another feature that is in preview. Anyone tried to use it? It's if you are managing a lot of resources in many subscriptions and even management groups, it's very tedious to use ARM to query your resource data. So that's why we have resource graph. Because it's basically a caching layer of all the metadata, and you can query it fast across the environments. It uses its own language that is luckily based on the same foundation, which is KQL or Custo query language, which you can use in other places like Log Analytics or Application Insights. So if you learn that, you know KQL. So you can build again rich dashboards based on the results from those queries. Since this is a new thing, I would really quickly like to show you that. So there is a GUI for that, luckily, good for demos, called Resource Graph Explorer. And it has like the schema on the left. It has a query page and the result page. And of course, instead of trying to write some queries now, I can give you some examples by simply using some saved queries. Simple one. Give me all the resources I have. 92. I'm trying to keep my spending limits in my internal subscription, so that's good. How about something more advanced? List resources by its type. Yeah, a bit more. But how about if I change the scope and now try to search and include some of our demo subscriptions like Contoso. It didn't take that long, right? So I really love that. And the fact that you can actually pin the results to a dashboard or make even a graph out of it is really, really powerful. So this team, of course, is not working in a vacuum. We need to seek for continuous improvements, and we need to work with our customers and ask for feedback. So what we did, we provided them with a surprisingly easy feedback channel. Since we manage our work on GitHub, then every customer gets access to our backlog, and they can issue either a bug or a feature request. So they can explain why they need it, and we can actually budget for it in our next sprint. What we are also trying to do is, I know that for developers, testing is a no-brainer. We all do testing, but how do you test in this scenario when you're building a platform? Well, it's more tricky. We don't work with assemblies, but we have JSON files defining our infrastructure and our structure. So again, what we are trying to use is to embrace Pazdera. And for each and every artifact we add to the platform, we create a Pazdera test with tests that we believe are important in order to validate that the file itself is correctly formatted. And of course, more importantly, it does what it's supposed to do in the end. So we have stages. We have dev, test, and production. And in test, we are actually deploying those resources or applying those changes in policies and testing them and see what the results are. And since we are using Azure pipelines, we can actually publish Pazdera tests in the pipeline itself and see the result. And based on that, we can make decisions. Should we push it to production or not? And yes, end user documentation. Nobody's reading that, but it's important to have it, because people then can't blame us that we didn't give them enough details what to do. And as part of a continuous improvement, we try to automate ourselves, our processes, because it's still 6 people and we go on vacation, there are sick leaves. So I can give you one example, and then I will give you room for questions. One example of a task. We were tasked to create a service, shared service for domain join. Yeah, why would you need a domain join in the cloud? Well, it's, again, mainly for the scenarios where you are lifting and shifting your existing VMs to the cloud, or you're building maybe a new application that still has a dependency on Kerberos and NTLM and your good old domain. So we need to provide that service. But how would it normally work without this automation? Well, you would need to give people rights to do the domain join to that corporate domain in the first place. And they would probably somehow write those secrets in that ARM template with the extension, domain join extension. And this is no-go, right? There are so many security faults. So what we did instead, we're using a few components. We are saying, if you want your VM to be domain joined, just provide a specific tag. Domain join, yes. Easy. And yes, it needs to be a Windows VM in this stage. We are later on maybe thinking about Linux as well, but it's not really like a full domain join, really. So what we're doing is that we are capturing events from the activity log when there is a new VM created or updated, and it has this specific tag. We are triggering a workflow. We are using activity log alert. If you haven't used that, it's really, really powerful. It's a simple thing. It's actually an ARM resource, so you can actually create that programmatically in your ARM template too. And we link it with something called action group, which is basically routing of your events to different places. It could go to a function. Azure Functions, you know those probably. Logic apps, it can actually integrate with your ITSM tooling like ServiceNow, because there are pre-built connectors. If that's what you like to do, perfect. And it can integrate with anything that supports webhooks. So I don't have time to do the last demo, but I have a demo with Slack integration, which is very easy to do. So, or maybe I could show in the end. So the action group will decide if this alert or event comes, I will actually trigger this logic app workflow. The logic app itself is quite simple. We use it. We could have piped it directly to the next component, which is runbook automation runbook. But we use it because we would like to send some emails to that user that requested this domain join and saying it failed or it was completed successfully. And logic apps are really good for that because you don't need to code everything. So the automation runbook will do a number of validations. Is my VM in the right VNet? Is that VNet configured properly? Can it see my domain controllers in the cloud? And it will run this in something called hybrid runbook worker. Why is it so? Well, if you use just pure automation account, it has only internet connectivity. It can't connect directly to your virtual network where your domain controls typically reside. And nobody is having really open internet access to their domain. I haven't seen that customer. So what do we do instead? We have a simple VM running in that VNet that is either directly where the domain controls are or peered. And the runbook is executing on that VM. Just to improve the security, of course, we use template and parameter files. In parameter files, we don't store secrets, but we refer to a key vault. And we have those secrets in a key vault. We have key rotation process for changing that special key that allows the domain join. And that's what we did. And it surprisingly works very well. But there is one more reason why we decided to use the hybrid runbook worker. You never know unless you check, is that new computer you're trying to add to the domain already a member? Is that this computer with the same name in that domain already? If it is, in most of the cases, it depends on the AD how it's configured, but in most cases, it will actually reset that account in AD. So your true production computer will lose that access, will lose that identity. And the new VM, that could be a dummy VM, can actually retain it. So what we do as an important part is that this runbook is checking against the domain. Is there a computer that already exists or not? So I will ask you, have I answered these three primary questions? I believe that it is not just about governance. It's really quite a cool job to build that product and respond to customer needs. Every week we have some different demands. We need some HPC cluster over there, and they have some special things that you need to think about. We have teams that are building completely just cloud-based things, and of course they don't want to be limited with some policies. They want to play freely. And I don't think it's only for enterprises and big customers. If you are a small team or even a startup, you still should have some basic elements, maybe not a dedicated team, but you should think about that too. And I hope I proved that it's not only for migration, but for any project that you run in Azure. So, questions, comments? Are you still alive? No questions? Okay, then it was a pleasure. Yeah. Team of 6 people, yes. How many customers do they serve? That was the question. So it's hard to count because I think it depends how you count customers, but we have different departments in that organization, in Tony Stark's company. But each department can have smaller application teams building their own small projects. So yeah, it could be anything between 10 and 100. We haven't really counted. We only see them as identities coming to the platform and requesting access. So, but the good thing is that the platform is never meant to deploy any application. They have their own pipelines, their own source control, their own tooling. We only cater for the foundation. So in this way, we are hoping, and especially with the automation, we are able to support large number of customers in the future. Okay, So it was a pleasure talking to you. Thanks so much for coming, and enjoy the rest of the conference.